What's up guys? Today I'm going to show you how to take this pile of sticks and this wood with pencil markings on it and turn it into an awesome hangboard so you can keep training while COVID is happening.
Alright, the first thing we're going to do is take this board here, glue it to this board here with a lot of glue.
Hey guys, so here you're going to see me gluing up the two boards together. The main reason I did this was because wood that is 2x12, 2x6, 2x8 is actually only 1.5 inches thick. And the first hold I wanted on this board was going to be 1.5 inches because from previous board designs, 1 inch is good, but it wears you out pretty quickly as you start moving up. So I wanted to start with something a little bit deeper this time. Alright, and now you'll see me start marking out where the 2x4s are going to go on the ends. These 2x4s are going to be glued on and then cut to be rounded so they can act like jugs. And once the glue up was done, it was time to start clamping it down. I used all the clamps I could, just clamping around the edges, making sure everything was aligned as best it could. Later on, I would trim off the edges and things like that. But if you don't have a lot of clamps, I wouldn't worry about it. You can always use a rock or just something heavy. Glue is pretty forgiving. Alright, as you can see to the right, one jug is already complete, but it was such a disaster making it happen, I decided to edit that part of the video out. So instead, you're going to see me here with the proper process. First, I set the depth on my skill saw to only take out 1.5 inches on each side to start getting it round. I then used a mallet to smash away the pieces that were still stuck. I then got the jigsaw out and started taking off little pieces to start making it more circular. This was really helpful because the skill saw just doesn't have the versatility of a jigsaw, and this really helped get it round. I always make a joke to my friends that I'm slowly sanding my life away, whether it's on slabs or spackle or now jugs on a wood board. This takes a long time. It really helps to have some low grit sandpaper. I started out with 40, and that's all I used until the finishing process, in which I used 200 grit. I wanted to show you a couple more angles because it was really weird trying to create a circle slash sphere out of something that was rectangular. And what I ended up doing was using this sort of circular motion with the 40 grit sandpaper, and it slowly started to make it round. Now it's not perfectly round, but it's good enough for a jug. For this hangboard, I decided to use my square and really map out where each hold was going to be. I'd usually freehand it before this, and though that works, they're just not as precise. And if you don't have a framing square, that's fine too. You can always freehand it. For this board, I decided to start with 1.5 inch depth, then 1 inch, then 3/4, then 1/2 inch, then 1/4 inch. I left space in the middle to get creative and play with different router bits later on, so those holes had different varying depths based on what I was feeling in the moment. Above that, I also created 2 more holds, which were also going to vary in depth based on what type of router bits I decided to use. Next, I went over to the table saw and started cutting off strips. I did 1/4 inch, 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and strips like that, but the truth is, you can cut strips to whatever thickness you would like that work for you and your training purposes. And here's the final design. Before you start routing, I highly suggest that you write the depths that you want next to the holes, because if you write them in the holes, they will get routed out. The next suggestion I would make, which makes the process so much easier, is drawing in the holes that need to be routed. So you start with your bit at a 1/4 inch depth into the wood. At this point, all holes would be colored in. Then you go and route all the holes. Now you would set your bit to 1/2 inch depth and route out the holes that need that depth. And you keep continuing this process until you've reached your deepest routing depth. The advantage of this method is you don't have to constantly keep changing the depth of your router. You hit all 1/4 inch, then you drop it to 1/2 inch, you do all of those, and then you drop it to 3/4 inch, you do all of those, and so on and so forth. It's extremely efficient because the 1.5 inch depth hold needs a 3/4 inch depth route, and you can do that while you do the other ones that require it as well. By now you probably realized that I switched routers. The reason being was the first Ryobi router kept jamming into the jugs that I created, and I couldn't get close enough to create the holes that I wanted, so I switched to the Bosch. I decided I wanted my holes to be on the same horizontal plane as best as possible, so I've achieved this by setting up a router fence using a piece of wood I had laying around and some clamps. When the routing fence didn't fit, I just did it freehand. To make this board more interesting, and in my opinion, more lifelike, unlike my ability to narrate a good tutorial, I decided to take different router bits and route out the edges of the holds so that they weren't all square. I don't know about you, but climbing outside, nothing is perfect. Nothing is smooth. Nothing is the way you really want it to be. I mean, occasionally it is, but most of the time it's not. And I wanted to represent that in this board for myself. And in opposition to that, I decided to sand the corners so they didn't completely dig into my hands as I hung from them. It just makes it a little bit smoother. Then I went over everything with 220 grit sandpaper on my orbital sander. I went over everything with the orbital sander because, as you remember, the jugs were done with 40 grit. So I went over them with 220 to make them smoother. I went over the edges to make them smoother and just basically hit everywhere I could. I had somebody tell me that those holes looked pretty gnarly. My response was perfect. Again, I wanted to represent what it was going to be like when I'm actually outside climbing, like on this 512 granite slab. There's nothing perfect about this, but all the holds have to work. And if I can bring into my training that quote unquote imperfection, I think I'll be better off because of it. And I think you will too. The first thing I did was find the studs. This is pretty easy with a stud finder. The next thing I did was hang up the board and draw a line above the top of the hangboard so that I could see where it would eventually line up on the studs. I also took the time to trace around the hangboard so that I could see where it would be. I then drilled the first hole into a strong spot in the board. If you do this in your house, please put something underneath the board. You don't want to ruin your floors. I have this propped up on another piece of wood. I then went over to the wall and drilled into the stud. I used 3/8 inch lag bolts to secure the hangboard to the studs. You must screw the hangboard into the studs. This is extremely important because of the amount of weight that you will be putting on it. After placing the lag bolt into the stud, I went over to the original line that I drew for my second stud and sighted down that line to find the placement of my next lag bolt into the hangboard. I then took the hangboard back down to find the placement of the second lag bolt. I then measured and drilled a hole in the wall for the second lag bolt. After I feel the drill get through the sheetrock, I like to take it out just to make sure that I'm actually going to drill into the stud. I then measured across, and then I measured down so I can make a crosshair to find exactly where I'm going to drill this lag bolt into the board. I wonder how many times in this tutorial I'll say lag bolt. I then drilled a hole through the hangboard where I wanted the lag bolt to go, and I screwed the lag bolt in so that when I brought it up to the wall, it was already mostly in the hangboard. Finally, it was time to hang the hangboard. It felt very satisfying. I screwed in the lag bolts with a hex wrench until I felt the board securely adhere itself to the wall. I then used two 3.5-inch screws to secure the bottom portion of it to the studs. And now it was finally time for a test. The holds felt great and the board felt secure. However, after jumping up onto the jugs, I felt like they could use a little bit more security, maybe just psychologically, than glue. So I decided to go back and put one screw in each one. And now they both mentally and physically felt great, and that they could support my weight as I hang on for dear life.
I want to thank you guys for watching my first tutorial on how to build a hangboard. I was inspired because I was stuck inside and I wanted to become a better climber. The hangboard that I built inside my house is different from the hangboard you see here. This one is much more simple. It has a few holds. The one inside the house that I demonstrated was more complicated because I wanted to show what could be done with them. But also it can be really simple. You just need something to hang on. You need some wood, a router, and some screws. And if you don't have a router, I saw a guy on YouTube do it with a chisel. This is the time to keep working out to get stronger, so when you come back to your local gym, you can climb like a beast. Thank you very much once again.